The gate sign meant the world to her, a proud symbol of her husband's service, now ripped down by the neighborhood tyrant. But this retired veteran's wife wasn't going down without a fight. As the confrontation spiraled, she realized the true cost of standing up to a Karen. The stakes were higher than she ever imagined. Janice stared at the empty spot on her gate, heart pounding. The faded, hand-painted sign, a cherished gift from the local Veterans Council, was gone. Ripped down in the night by her neighbor, the notorious HOA president Karen Weston. She gripped the mangled bolts, fingernails digging into her palms. How dare that woman touch her husband's memorial? After all Sergeant Roger Connor had sacrificed, this was his final insult. Janice stormed across the lawn, bypassing her manicured roses to hammer on Karen's pristine white door. It swung open to reveal the perfectly coiffed neighborhood terror, expertly wielding false sweetness. "Why, Janice? What a lovely surprise. How can I help you this fine morning?" Janice's voice shook with rage. "You know damn well why I am here. That sign was a gift from the Veterans Council. It honored my husband's service, and you had no right to take it down." Karen tusked, wagging a disapproving finger. Now, let's not get upset. I was simply enforcing our HOA guidelines. Signs and decorations must be pre-approved, you know. Surely you understand." "Pre-approved?" Janice scoffed. "That sign has been up for years. It's not some gaudy lawn ornament. It's a memorial to a man who gave his life for this country." Karen's smile tightened. "I'm very sorry for your loss, Janice, but rules are rules. I'm sure you can find another way to honor your husband that doesn't clutter up the neighborhood." "Clutter up the neighborhood." Janice's voice rose to a shrill pitch. "That sign is a symbol of sacrifice, not some tacky lawn flamingo." Karen's eyes narrowed. "I'll have to ask you to lower your voice, dear. The neighbors will start to talk." Janice glared, chest heaving. "The neighbors can mind their own business. This isn't over, Karen. That sign is going back up, and you're going to apologize." With that, she whirled and stalked back to her own pristine lawn, mind racing. She couldn't let that sanctimonious shrew get away with this. Roger had given everything for his country. The least she could do was fight for the right to honor his memory. Late of that afternoon, Janice sat at her kitchen table, staring at the phone. She had to do something, but what? She couldn't let Karen's petty tyranny stand, but taking on the HOA president directly risked neighborhood backlash. Just then, the phone rang, and Janice snatched it up. "Hello?" "Janice, it's Bob from the Veterans Council. I heard about what happened with your gate sign. I'm so sorry. That's absolutely outrageous." Janice sagged with relief. "Bob, thank goodness you called. I don't know what to do. That woman ripped down the sign like it was nothing." I know. Bob's voice was heavy with sympathy. "Look, we take this kind of thing very seriously. That sign was a token of our gratitude, and we won't stand for it being desecrated. We're going to make this right." Janice felt a surge of hope. "What do you mean? What are you going to do?" "We're coming down there ourselves to put the sign back up, and we're bringing the whole council with us. Karen Weston is about to get a lesson in respecting our veterans." Janice's eyes widened. The whole council. But won't that cause a scene? "You bet it will," Bob said grimly. "And that's exactly what we want. It's time Karen learned that she can't just trample all over people like this. We'll make sure the whole neighborhood sees what she's done." Janice felt a grim smile spread across her face. "I like the sound of that. When are you coming?" "We'll be there first thing tomorrow morning. Get ready for a bit of a showdown, Janice. This is going to be epic." As Janice hung up the phone, a surge of determination coursed through her. Roger had always been so proud of his service, and she'd be damned if she let anyone disrespect his memory. Tomorrow, Karen was going to learn a very painful lesson. The next morning, Janice stood at her gate, heart racing with anticipation. Right on schedule, a caravan of cars pulled up, disgorging a small army of veterans in crisp uniforms. At the front, Bob strode up to Janice, a grim expression on his face. "Morning, Janice. You ready for this?" Janice nodded, trying to quell the nerves fluttering in her stomach. "As ready as I'll ever be. Let's do this." With a nod, Bob turned to the group. "All right, men, let's show this neighborhood what respect for our veterans really looks like." The veterans surged forward, fanning out to flank Janice's gate. Several of them hefted the newly repaired sign, holding it up proudly. Janice couldn't help but feel a surge of pride as she watched them work. Just then, the front door of Karen's pristine white house slammed open, and the woman herself came charging out, face flushed with rage. "What is the meaning of this?" she shrieked, marching up to the group. "You have no right to be here." Bob stepped forward, his expression steely. "Ma'am, we're here to reinstate this sign, which honors a fallen veteran. It's a permanent fixture, and we won't allow it to be removed." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Permanent fixture? Don't be ridiculous. This is a private community, and I'm the one who decides what's allowed on these streets." "Not this time, ma'am," Bob said firmly. "This sign is a gift from the Veterans Council, and it's staying put. If you have a problem with that, you can take it up with us." Karen's face turned an alarming shade of puce. "Take it up with you? Do you have any idea who I am? I'm the president of this HOA, and I won't be dictated to by a bunch of uniformed thugs." The veterans exchanged amused glances, and Janice couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. Karen was about to get a rude awakening. Janice watched with bated breath as the standoff unfolded. Karen's face was twisted with fury, while the veteran stood tall and resolute. She could practically see the steam coming out of the HOA president's ears. "Thugs?" Bob scoffed. "Ma'am, we're not thugs. We're patriots who fought and bled for this country, and we won't stand by and let you disrespect the memory of one of our own." Karen's eyes narrowed to slits. "I don't care what you are. This is my neighborhood, and I won't have you coming in here and making a scene. Now take that ridiculous sign and get off my property before I call the police." Bob's expression hardened. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to calm down and listen. This sign is staying put, whether you like it or not. If you have a problem with that, you can take it up with our lawyers." Janice felt a surge of pride as she watched the veterans stand their ground. Karen's face turned an even deeper shade of red, and for a moment, Janice thought the woman might actually explode. "Lawyers?" Karen sputtered. "How dare you threaten me? I'll have you all arrested for trespassing." "Go ahead and try it," Bob said calmly. "But I can guarantee you that the media attention and public outrage will be far more damaging to your precious HOA than a little sign on a gate." Karen's face twisted with fury, and Janice couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. For once, the neighborhood tyrant was being put in her place. "This isn't over," Karen hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "Mark my words, you'll all regret the day you crossed me." With that, she whirled and stormed back into her house, slamming the door behind her. Janice couldn't help but let out a shaky breath, the adrenaline finally starting to ebb. "Well, that went about as well as we could have hoped," Bob said, a hint of a smile playing around his lips. "Now let's get this sign back up where it belongs." Janice nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude for the veterans who had rallied to her cause. With their help, she might just be able to stand up to the neighborhood bully and win. Over the next few days, Janice watched with a mix of trepidation and satisfaction as the fallout from the confrontation unfolded. Word had quickly spread through the neighborhood about the Veterans Council's showdown with Karen, and the response was decidedly mixed. Some residents, like Janice's next-door neighbor Margie, were firmly on her side. "It's about time someone put that woman in her place," Margie had declared over the fence. "That sign is a beautiful tribute, and she had no right to take it down." Others, however, seemed to side with Karen. Janice had overheard whispers and muttered complaints as she walked by, and she knew that the HOA president was rallying her supporters. Disrespecting the HOA rules, they would mutter, causing a scene in the neighborhood. Janice tried to shake off their disapproval, but she couldn't help but worry that it would come back to haunt her. After all, this was the same Karen who had once gotten a family evicted for having the audacity to park their car on their own driveway. Sure enough, a few days later, Janice received a summons to appear before the HOA board. She felt her stomach twist with dread as she read the formal-sounding letter, outlining a litany of supposed violations and demanding her immediate compliance. "This is ridiculous," Janice muttered, crumpling the paper in her fist. "I'm not going to let that woman bully me into submission." Steeling her resolve, Janice marched over to Karen's house, fully prepared for another confrontation. But when the door swung open, it wasn't the HOA president who greeted her. It was a well-dressed man with a briefcase. "Mrs. Connor," he said, his voice smooth and professional. "I'm Richard Harrington, the HOA's attorney. I'm here to discuss the violations outlined in our letter." Janice felt her heart sink. She'd known this was coming, but somehow the reality of it still caught her off guard. "I'm not paying any fines or removing that sign," she said firmly. "It's a memorial to my husband, and it's staying put." Harrington raised a hand, his expression placating. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm simply here to discuss the matter and try to find a reasonable solution." Janice eyed him warily. "A reasonable solution? I think the reasonable solution is for you and Karen to leave me and my husband's memorial alone." Harrington sighed, shaking his head. "I understand this is an emotional issue for you, Mrs. Connor. But the fact is, the HOA has rules and regulations that apply to everyone in the community. We can't make exceptions, no matter how heartfelt the reason." Janice felt a surge of anger. Heartfelt. This isn't some trinket or lawn ornament. It's a symbol of my husband's sacrifice. And you're telling me that your precious HOA rules are more important than that. The attorney held up his hands in a placating gesture. "I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that we need to find a way to honor your husband's memory that doesn't conflict with the HOA guidelines. Perhaps we could look into a plaque or a dedicated bench instead." Janice felt her temper flare. "A plaque? A bench? That's not good enough. That sign is staying right where it is, and if you or Karen try to remove it, you're going to have a fight on your hands." Harrington's expression hardened. "I see. Well, in that case, I'm afraid we have no choice but to proceed with the violations and potential legal action. I hope you'll reconsider, Mrs. Connor, for all our sakes." With that, he turned and strode back to his car, leaving Janice seething with fury. She knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. As the days passed, the pressure from the HOA continued to mount. Janice received a steady stream of increasingly threatening letters, each one outlining new violations and demanding immediate compliance. The fines, she was told, would only continue to grow until the sign was removed. But Janice refused to back down. She knew that removing the sign would be a betrayal of her husband's memory, and she wasn't about to let Karen and her cronies win. So she stood her ground, even as the neighborhood tension steadily escalated. The once friendly greetings from her neighbors turned to cold stares and whispered disapproval. Janice could feel the weight of their judgment as she walked down the street, and she knew that Karen was working overtime to turn the community against her. Then, one evening, as Janice was tending to her garden, she heard the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. Whirling around, she gasped in horror as she saw the shards of her front window lying on the ground, the gaping hole surrounded by a spiderweb of cracks. Trembling, she rushed inside, heart pounding. Thankfully, there was no one in the room, and a quick inspection revealed that nothing had been stolen. But the message was clear. This was an act of intimidation, a warning to back down before things escalated further. Janice knew exactly who was behind it. Karen Weston and her band of HOA lackeys, lashing out in a desperate attempt to force her compliance. But she refused to be cowed, even as the fear and anger threatened to overwhelm her. Steeling her resolve, she picked up the phone and dialed the number for the local police station. As she waited for the line to connect, she couldn't help but wonder what other horrors Karen had in store for her. But she was determined to fight, no matter the cost. When the officer finally answered, Janice took a deep breath and launched into a detailed account of the incident, her voice quivering with a mix of fear and fury. She knew that this was just the beginning of a long and bitter battle, but she was more determined than ever to stand up for her husband's memory and to take down the neighborhood tyrant once and for all. In the days that followed, Janice's life became a whirlwind of activity as the conflict with the HOA escalated. The police had dutifully filed a report about the broken window, but she knew that the real battle was just beginning. Karen and her cronies on the HOA board were relentless, bombarding Janice with violation notices and demands for compliance. The fines continued to pile up, and Janice knew that it was only a matter of time before they tried to take legal action. But she refused to back down. With the support of the Veterans Council, she hired a high-powered lawyer to represent her interests. And as the legal battle began to unfold, Janice found herself thrust into the spotlight of the local media. At first, she had been hesitant to speak out publicly, afraid of the backlash from her neighbors. But as the story gained traction, she realized that she had a powerful platform to expose the injustices of the HOA and rally support for her cause. Janice's impassioned pleas for justice and respect for her husband's memory struck a chord with the community, and soon she was being hailed as a symbol of resistance against the tyranny of the Homeowners Association. Karen, on the other hand, found herself on the defensive. As the media spotlight intensified, her attempts to portray Janice as a rule-breaking troublemaker fell flat. Instead, the public outcry against her actions only seemed to grow. Desperate to regain control of the narrative, Karen resorted to increasingly desperate measures. She tried to rally her supporters on the HOA board to vote for Janice's removal, but the backlash was swift and fierce. Janice, meanwhile, refused to be intimidated. She continued to fight tooth and nail, using every legal and public relations tool at her disposal to keep the pressure on. And as the battle wore on, she began to sense that the tide was turning in her favor. Finally, after months of bitter conflict, the HOA board was forced to back down. Facing overwhelming public pressure and the threat of a costly legal battle, they agreed to not only reinstate the sign, but also to issue a formal apology to Janice and the Veterans Council. As Janice stood in front of her restored gate, surrounded by her newfound allies, she felt a sense of triumph and relief. She had refused to be cowed by the neighborhood tyrant, and in the end, justice had prevailed. But as she looked out over the community, she couldn't help but wonder what the long-term consequences of this battle would be. Would the rift between her and her neighbors ever truly heal? And what would the future hold for her and her family in this once peaceful community? In the aftermath of the HOA showdown, Janice found herself at a crossroads. The victory over Karen and the HOA board had been hard-won, but it had come at a steep personal cost. Her once peaceful neighborhood had become a battlefield, with her former friends and neighbors either staunchly supporting her or bitterly condemning her actions. The rift in the community felt irreparable, and Janice couldn't help but wonder if she had done more harm than good. As she sat on her porch, staring at the newly reinstated sign, Janice felt a deep sense of bittersweet emotion. She was proud of her stand, of the way she had refused to back down in the face of Karen's relentless bullying. But she also couldn't ignore the simmering resentment and tension that now permeated the air around her. One day, as she was tending to her garden, Margie, her once friendly neighbor, approached her, a conflicted expression on her face. "Janice," she said, her voice hesitant. I wanted to apologize. For not standing with you sooner, I mean. I should have been more supportive, and I'm sorry I wasn't." Janice felt a surge of emotion, her eyes stinging with tears. "Margie, you've been a wonderful friend. Don't apologize. I know how difficult this has all been. Margie nodded, her own eyes glistening. I know, but it doesn't make it right. I let Karen and her cronies intimidate me, and I should have been braver. I'm so sorry, Janice. Janice reached out and pulled Margie into a tight hug, letting the tears flow freely. Thank you, she whispered. That means more to me than you know. As they broke apart, Janice couldn't help but notice the wary glances from some of the other neighbors. It was clear that the rift in the community would not be easily mended, and she wondered if the price of her victory had been too high. But even as she grappled with these doubts, Janice knew that she couldn't regret her actions. Roger's memory and the sacrifice he had made for his country had been worth fighting for. And in the end, she had stood up to the neighborhood tyrant and won. As she looked out over the now quiet street, Janice felt a renewed sense of purpose. She would continue to honor her husband's legacy, and she would do it with the same unwavering determination that had carried her through this battle. And maybe, just maybe, she could help heal the wounds in her community, one neighbor at a time. It wouldn't be easy, but Janice was prepared to face the challenges head-on. After all, she had already proven that she was not one to be trifled with. And as she gazed at the sign, a bittersweet smile crossed her lips. This is for you, Roger, she whispered, and I'll never stop fighting for what's right.